The following is a listener-supported ministry from the Grace Evangelical Society.
With Ephesians 4:8 in mind, Acts 2:34 seems to say something about the disposition of King David's body. Peter mentions this in his famous Pentecost sermon. Did David ascend into heaven from Hades, or is his body still there? We will grapple with this question today. We're glad you're with us, friend. This is Grace in Focus, the radio broadcast and podcast ministry of the Grace Evangelical Society. Find out more about us by going to our website, faithalone.org. We'd love for you to come and be with us at our National Annual Conference. Time is getting short. Get registered today. The dates are May the 19th through the 22nd, and all of the information is at our website, faithalone.org. Now with today's question and answer discussion, here are Bob Wilkin and Ken Yates.
We have a great question sent in from Megan about Acts chapter 2, verse 34. And Peter's preaching and he says, "For David did not ascend into the heavens, but he says himself," and then he quotes from Psalm 110, "The Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand." And so Megan's question is, first of all, why does Peter say that David did not ascend into the heavens? Because she's under the impression that at the resurrection of Christ, believers who were in Hades at the time, the good part of Hades, went to be with the Lord when he rose. And so the second part of her question follows, is Peter saying that he never ascended in the clouds like Jesus? In other words, okay, so why does Peter say that David did not ascend, and does that mean he never ascended?
Okay, that's a good question. And Ken and I were talking before we began this session, and there are a couple things. First of all, the verse I think that Megan's interested in is Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 8. Which says, when he ascended on high, he led captivity captive and gave gifts to men. So that verse does say that when he ascended into the third heaven, he led captivity captive. That is, he took the people who were in Hades, who were believers, and he took them to the third heaven. But now you have the question, so what does verse 34 of Acts 2 mean? And I think, first of all, we need to recognize that Peter is preaching Christ as the Messiah. And he's saying God guaranteed the Messiah would not see decay. The Messiah would rise from the dead before his body would decay. So he rose from the dead on the third day. David, however, if you read in verse 29, it says, he is both dead and buried, and his tomb is with us to this day. And what he means is his body was in that tomb until about 10 days before this. In other words, he's speaking on Pentecost, which is 10 days after Jesus ascended. Isn't that the right timing, Ken?
Yes. So 10 days after he ascended. Exactly. Right.
So then you have the question, well, why does it say David did not ascend into the heavens? And I think there's two reasons. One, David didn't ascend into heaven on the third day after he died, or 43 days after he died. David didn't rise from the dead on the third day, and David didn't ascend 40 days after that. And David, his tomb still existed at the time Peter was speaking. But the other part of it is, and I think this is important, we don't know exactly how the people in Sheol or Hades were transported to the third heaven. Clearly, it wasn't visible, right? Jesus' ascension was visible in Acts 1. They saw him go up into the clouds like a helium balloon going up into the air. But nobody saw David going up, and nobody saw all the Old Testament saints going up. I think it's likely they went directly from Hades to the third heaven with no gradual going up. They just, boom, appeared there. Just like I think in the rapture, I don't think we're going to be slowly going up into the air and we're going to be dodging airplanes or something. It seems to me we're going to go directly from wherever we are to the clouds. Boom. And we'll meet the Lord there. Do you agree with that, Ken?
Well, I want to ask you something about that. First of all, on Megan's question here, when you go up to verses 25 through 28, it's talking about you will not see corruption. And Peter's, would you say this, Bob? The main point here is that David is not talking about himself.
Yeah.
He's not, the point is he's talking about the Christ.
Right.
And that's Peter's point, right? He goes, listen, David's here. You can go to his tomb. His body's in there. If we went in there, there would probably be what? Little bitty bones left or something, whatever was there. His body obviously saw corruption. So he's talking about Christ, because the Jews there in Acts 2 are like, what's going on here? And Peter's point is Christ, the one you crucified, has risen from the dead. And he quotes from Psalm 16, and he goes like, David's talking in Psalm 16, but he's not talking about himself. He's talking about Christ. And so that's it.
It's coming. It'll be here before you know it. What am I talking about? The Grace Evangelical Society's National Conference 2025, May 19th through 22nd at Camp Copus, an absolutely beautiful campground in North Texas, right on the lake with lots of recreation, great food, a great place to stay, wonderful fellowship, and wonderful free grace Bible teaching. Information and online registration now at faithalone.org/events. First-timers waive registration fees. faithalone.org/events.
Now, on your point, the listeners get a bonus. Bob said that the rapture will be boom. Okay, we're gone. And that may certainly be the case. But I just want to ask Bob, I don't know if Bob and I have ever even talked about this. Could it be, though, that the world will see it? And I give the example of Elijah. If Elijah is a type of the rapture, and I've often heard that he is.
Yeah.
Elisha saw him go up.
Yeah.
So is it possible that in the rapture we will see, or the world will see, believers rise? I'm just asking if it's a possibility. And in that case, it would be like the ascension of the Lord, because the disciples saw him rise as well.
Yeah.
And what about the two witnesses in Revelation? Will the world see them ascend into heaven?
Isn't that Revelation 14?
Right.
I think it actually says they ascended out of sight, but let's take a look there real quick.
Yeah. I've often wondered that. I grew up in, those movies. What is it? Distant Horse. What are the name of those movies that had the rapture? I forgot what it's called. Oh, like A Thief in the Night. A Thief in the Night. The Left Behind movies, the rapture is presented as everybody just disappears and their clothes are left behind and stuff like that, and everybody's gone. And that may very well be, but I've just wondered how much validity maybe they'll see us.
And by the way, it's Revelation 11, verse 12. They heard a loud voice from heaven saying to them, "Come up here." And they ascended to heaven in a cloud, and their enemies saw them. That's what you were suggesting, right?
Yeah. When these ascend, the world sees them. When Elijah ascended, the world saw him, or those who were there. When the Lord ascended, the disciples saw him. Now, Enoch, as I recall, Enoch is just that he was not, so the Lord, we're not really told. But it seems to me that it's at least a possibility.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think I should amend what I said and say, I don't know if we can say for sure whether other people will see it. We know there's going to be a great delusion that Satan brings upon people. Otherwise, wouldn't everybody come to faith? I mean, if you saw millions, tens of millions of people going up into the sky, wouldn't everybody come to faith at that point, Ken?
Well, with that's a good argument. With the depravity of man, though, no. Who knows what lie the evil one is going to, propose to why these. I mean, whether people see them or whether they disappear immediately, he's going to have to come up with some reason for that.
That's a good point, yeah.
But your point's well taken, and I'm certainly not willing to die for that. I just, I've often wondered why we assume that they're just immediately gone, other than those movies that I saw as a teenager. But I'm open to it.
I think you were going to say Megan asked 2 or 3 things, or 3 or 4 things.
Yeah, do we have any other proof that Old Testament saints were taken to heaven from Hades. If I could expand that question a little bit more, do we have any, maybe expand it to say, do we have any proof that we know that before the ascension, believers were there? We know that from the parable of the rich man and Lazarus, for example.
Luke 16:19-31, which I don't think was a parable, but most people do. So, Ken, you stand with everybody else, but I say that's a real event.
Well, no, did I say parable? No, I don't have a problem saying that's a real event either.
Okay, good. I think it's a real event too.
Yeah, and so, but like, for example, in Revelation, we see that believers who died are in heaven. You know, they cry out from the altar, "How long, O Lord, until you avenge us on the earth?" And so there's that. You already mentioned Ephesians chapter 4, verse 8. Would you also include the believing thief on the cross when the Lord said, "Today you'll be with me"? Or what do you think's going on there? Today you'll be with me in paradise. Would you say so he went to Hades and he was with the Lord there? How would you describe what the Lord means?
Right. I'd say paradise is where Jesus was. So when he went to Hades, the good part of Hades became paradise. Then when he ascended, then that became paradise. And in Revelation 2, I think it's verse 7, it says the tree of life is in the paradise of God.
And that's where he'll be.
And the Garden of Eden in the Septuagint is the paradismos. The word garden is paradismos. It was paradise too, because Jesus walked with them in the garden in the cool of the day. So, yeah, I like this question, and I think it's clear that the believers who were in Hades have gone to the third heaven, but you are correct. Their bodies have not yet been resurrected. They're still in the grave.
And that's a major point of what Peter's discussing here in Acts 2, right? Because he said, look, his tomb is still there. You can go visit David's tomb.
Yep.
So it's talking about the Lord's resurrection.
Great questions, Megan. And I think she has a follow-up. Maybe we can get that in the next show.
Yeah, it's going to be a little bit tougher on that next one.
Tougher than this?
Well, she asked a question that's not related to A, B, and C there, so we'll have to hold it off for another one.
All right, everybody. Thanks so much, and let's all
keep grace in focus.
Would you be interested in some free ebooks on topics you hear on this program? Well, if you are, you need to come visit us at faithalone.org. That's faithalone.org. We would love to hear from you. Maybe you've got a question, comment, or some feedback. If you do, please don't hesitate to send us a message. Here's our email address. It's radio@faithalone.org. That's radio@faithalone.org. And when you do, very important, please let us know your radio station call letters and the city of your location. On our next episode, when Christ died, graves were opened and bodies of dead saints were being raised. What was this about? Join us, and in the meantime, let's keep grace in focus.
The proceeding has been a listener-supported ministry from the Grace Evangelical Society.